In 2020, our team at Strategic Momentum conducted a survey and published a report titled The State of Work and Career Success. We wanted to know, what does career and work success mean to today's professionals, and how has it changed? One of the things we found is that when people think about their careers, they don't just think about trading their time for money. Every age bracket surveyed, from those just entering the workforce to those who are at later stages in their career, told us that they want more than just a financial incentive. Their career goals are personal and multifaceted. Work-life goals are now intertwined because we now live in a world where we don't want them to be separate or siloed. And in today's pandemic world, they can't. But culturally, our measures and ideas of success are still rooted in the traditional model of what a career should look like, as well as that linear, sequential, and rigid approach to getting there. Yet, that often doesn't match workers' reality or desires today. As a result, a lot of us are unhappy, disengaged, or unfulfilled. 85% of employees are not engaged or actively disengaged in the workplace, according to Gallup's State of Global Workplace 2020 report. And according to Gallup's 2021 report, global employee engagement dropped another 2 points during 2020. At the same time, 95% of workers are thinking about quitting their jobs, according to a Monster.com survey. On top of that, 46% of employees told Gartner Inc. that they are largely dissatisfied with their overall experience at their organization, and only 13% responded that they are largely satisfied. And when I stepped back to take this all in, it helped solidify a feeling that's been growing in me for quite a few years now. But it's also a trend that I've been seeing in others. Creating meaningful work-life fit in today's ever-changing world requires redefining success as progress. We can see that too many people are unhappy. We can see that businesses of all sizes are struggling to adapt in a way that drives both business success and employee satisfaction. So I think it's time to change how we, as individuals, as well as the companies we work for, define success. That will require a shift in our mindset and approach so that we can achieve the alignment that helps us reach our full growth potential. And in this season, we'll be diving into stories from those who have done so in this new fluid world of work, and the tips and advice they share to help you ultimately build the business of you or help create that fluid organization. Today, we're going to focus on the individual, and specifically how individuals who are both successful and fulfilled in today's world define success and their perspectives and approach to achieving it so they could ultimately find that work-life fit for themselves. My name is Connie Steele, and I welcome you to the 6th season of Strategic Momentum.
Ooh. Well, I didn't know what the hell I was talking about in the early days.
The definition of success has changed quite a bit, right?
One of the things that has become really clear to me is that working for money, while necessary, will never be sufficient.
Yeah, so early I thought, I need a good salary. But, once I get a decent salary, I don't want to go to the top of the game because those guys work all the time.
So I came to grips, because I chased money in my 20s, that's not what motivated me.
I think at some point I stopped being motivated by money. Why am I, I don't even like the person, that more money would make me become.
That's the point, is it's a bottomless pit.
I think when you're younger and your career success is getting this promotion and this salary raise, and it was almost like a report card. So it was defined by somebody else.
I think my definition of success is kind of what was on my business card. The logo of the company, the title on the card was really what was important.
When I was younger, it was all about making sure that people thought that I was smart. That was success to me.
I know a lot of people will focus on money, and there are extrinsic things that are important so that you feel valued. But for me, it's mostly intrinsic.
Who am I? Am I being the best self?
Am I happy doing what I'm doing?
Now I realize, doing something I enjoy is much more important.
It seems, I think, really selfish now that I'm talking about it, but I'm pretty focused on maximizing my own potential.
And I always heard this when I was young, but I didn't pay a lot of attention to it, that really the thrill is in serving other people. It totally is.
I'm more motivated by feeling like I'm contributing and I'm doing something good in the world.
And if you can't connect your work to something that provides some sense of visceral purpose and meaning, then, all the money in the world is not going to make you engaged.
I really think about not just, are we earning a reasonable salary and can we pay the bills, but do we have some impact on the world?
Yes, we all ask ourselves, are our careers been successful? But I think, it kind of goes back to that famous line about nobody says on their deathbed, I wish I'd worked harder.
You just heard from a number of past Strategic Momentum guests who I asked the same question. How do you define career success? And when I went back and looked at all of them, I saw the same stories over and over again. They started their careers with that traditional definition of success we're all too familiar with. The title, money, and that upward progression as a result. But many of us have been doing a lot of introspection during the pandemic, and honestly before COVID, around what we really want out of work and life. It's those ever-present questions of what do we really want to do? Who do we want to be? How can we make a positive impact? All with the intent of being truly happy and fulfilled. Somewhere along the way, they changed, and the world changed. And I want to look at these moments of transition a little closer. What Jenny Blake, a career strategist, speaker, and author, refers to as a pivot.
Most of my career felt like fumbling through the dark. And I don't know if you or any of your listeners can relate to that, where for so long, and part of what sparked Pivot, which is my latest book, was just feeling like I was having some kind of crisis every time I hit what I now would call a pivot point, and feeling always that the problem was me. So when I was at UCLA going through undergraduate, I actually got the opportunity to work as the first employee at a startup in Palo Alto. And I was so lost and confused during that time. I didn't know what to wear to work, how to show up. I didn't know anything about adulting, as we would now call it. And that led me to start my first website in 2005 called Life After College, trying to help other people feel less lost and alone. And that's really been a thread through so much of what I do, is that I kind of struggle through something and then create resources around it. And that side hustle, that work on the side, which has now been my full-time consulting practice for almost 10 years, also carried me over. I pivoted from the startup to Google after 2 years. Within Google, when I hit plateaus or pivot points, I often felt that there was something wrong with me, that I must be one of those entitled millennials that the media keeps talking about. Why can't I just be happy, especially at this big fancy brand and dream job? And after 5.5 years at Google in coaching and career development, I pivoted to self-employment, not thinking I was at all cut out for it, but just knowing I would regret if I didn't at least try. My first book, Life After College, was launching based on the blog. And so in 2011, I ended up leaving Google. I moved to New York. And once again, 2 years into self-employment, I had another total existential crisis of wondering what's next. And this time I didn't have a paycheck funding that exploration. So I had to figure it out, or I would have to close my business and or leave New York, neither of which I wanted to do. And solving it in that moment with 2 weeks left to pay the rent and no money in the bank account, that's what sparked Pivot, and really the reason we're here today.
How do you feel all of those experiences, though, have shaped the way you approach exactly what you do and how you do today? Because certainly you've had a ton of pivots and you've had a lot of really interesting ups and downs that folks can relate to. It'd be great for you to share that.
There are two big things. One, I learned to stop taking my pivots personally and thinking that there was something wrong with me. Even in terms of leaving Google and launching my own business, I realized that every time I had hit one of those moments, I was so focused on what I didn't want, what I didn't know, what I didn't have, that none of that propelled me forward. It really just sent me reeling into a pit of despair, focusing on what I didn't want. And you and I were having this conversation even before we hit record, that it's common to do that. We know the feeling when we're stuck, when we're at a plateau, when we're bored, disengaged, overwhelmed, or simply working in something that's not our zone of genius, working in like a dread zone where we dread doing the work that's on our plate. And when that's happening, it's easy to stay stuck there and stay focused on all the things we don't want, even as we start attempting to search for what's next. What I found is that it's only by looking at what is working, even if it's just 5 or 10%, and saying, what have I always been good at? What do I enjoy? Even if it's only a small percent of what I do now, what can I double down on to help me shift in a new direction? And the second piece is something we often practiced at Google, which was be scrappy. Don't wait till things are perfect. Launch and iterate was a mantra we had internally there. So in Pivot in the book, I talk about piloting as being this really crucial way to work into what's next, that ultimately Pivot, there's a 4-stage method that I talk about. It just boils down to, what can I try? The big secret is we're all pivoting more often than not. And the people who are the most agile, and what has helped me stay much more calm than in previous pivots earlier in my career, is knowing that I cannot possibly know the answers. All I can do are line up a few pilots or small experiments at any given time and see which ones start to take on traction of their own. And that helps calm a lot of the fears and the pressure of trying to get it right from the outset. So what is a career? I share the metaphor of a smartphone, not a ladder. So first of all, there's no upward climb. It's really about, do the apps on your phone, all the different skills, education, experiences, hobbies, side hustles, those are all your apps. Do they work for you? We don't compare our phone to someone else and say, who has better apps, you or me? It's, have I customized the apps on my phone to work for my needs, my lifestyle, how I like to have fun, what I need for productivity? And so I think of career as much more modular and even a pivot portfolio.
Jenny just has a way of bringing this concept into clarity, what I like to call the career mashup. We're talking about the career of the future and present, in which workers are able to merge their breadth of skills, interests, passions, and experiences into a career that fits a person's whole self. It's this alignment they are finding between who they are, what value they want to deliver in the world, and the work they do. That hybrid may be something that happens in a particular role or position in a current or future job, or it could be parallel pathing multiple jobs at once. Today, younger modern professionals yearn to defy labels and reject boxes. They favor a variety of experiences to help shape their day-to-day jobs into dynamic and meaningful careers that happen to have a paycheck attached. The career mashup is how it happens, and each career mashup is a series of pivots or transitions. And I think Jenny's pivot methodology is so helpful in thinking about this because it's both strategic and personal, leveraging your strengths, your successes, and what you're able to do right now.
So career pivot, I define as methodically shifting in a new direction by doubling down on what's already working. And it doesn't have to be big moves. So a lot of people, especially organizations that bring me in maybe to speak, are worried that I'm going to have all their employees trying to pivot out of their role tomorrow. And so many pivots start, in fact, the most successful pivots start right where you are. So you can pivot within the role that you have, within your own business, within, if you're self-employed, how you structure your client engagements. If you're in a role, you can take on interesting stretch projects or join sort of cross-functional groups. There's so much that can be done outside of the limitations of a role. Especially, roles are just a way that companies hire us. We
Right.
all know that our job scope changes so much from one day to the next as the organization grows and the market changes. So career pivot is just saying, I'm ready for something new. I'm ready to grow in a new direction. But the methodical piece and doubling down on what's working means you're also not starting from scratch. So it's less of a big leap or blind faith, go all in on a new direction with absolutely no data and no experience in that direction. Those are the riskiest. Pivoting is about reducing risk by looking at what's working and shifting methodically from that place. And so many of our pivots are actually a product of our success. And that's something that became clear to me when I was working on the book, especially for impactors, that we think, oh, I'm at a pivot point because I must have done something wrong. But really, it means that you've succeeded at the role that you had or the set of projects that you had. And now you're looking for greater growth bigger stretch and impact.
People have a greater ability to change their circumstances and more power to control how they work than at any other time in history. And both individuals and organizations can benefit when they understand how to embrace a future of work that is less homogenous and more fluid. Brian DeLautenville is the founder and CEO of Benevity, a global leader in corporate social responsibility and employee engagement software. And in creating a greater force of social good in the world, he's realized, and in some ways, quantified the transformative power of culture.
In the power of culture, both in a company and in society. And I think, Benevity's little vision is to be a catalyst to infuse a culture of goodness into the world. We figure if Google can organize the world's information, we can at least infuse goodness into the world. It's lofty, but if we achieved it, and we were, we had a little more of a more for we mentality, not in a socialist sort of way necessarily, but just as opposed to the me as victim, more for me. Some of the sentiments that are really kind of driving the populist movement in political circles, there is absolutely little question that we would have a better shot at solving some of the complex social issues that we have been pouring billions of dollars into for many years in a principally top-down sort of high net worth and corporate grant-making model. If we can add to that the power of individuals, that collective army of one, if you will, we have a much better chance of solving them.
The same is true when it comes to redefining success. Finding clarity for yourself is important. And as you've heard at the beginning of this episode, it can completely change your personal levels of happiness and fulfillment. And that fundamentally starts with understanding your why, so you can get to the what, how, and when. Let's hear a little more about that moment when you start to get clarity from Brian Stolley, whose voice you might recognize from the beginning of this episode.
Ooh. Well, I didn't know what the hell I was talking about in the early days. 'Cause you don't know the reality until, although, at that time, the world in a lot of ways and organizations were still very much tended to be a command and control kind of place. The world today is very different. One of the lessons I learned early on was how the most important word in the English language is probably why. Understanding why something is being done, why somebody has this idea, why they're trying to accomplish this, understanding, why is so critical, because too often we're presented with what. Here's what I want. But if I knew why you wanted it, what you were actually trying to accomplish, I might actually know something you don't and have a completely different way to approach the problem that might be much cheaper, faster, and better. Because why is so fundamentally important to everything. And if an organization embraces why, and not in a confrontational way, but in a I want to understand so I can do a better job way, it is going to be so much more effective. And I think that's really one of the biggest benefits of millennials in the workforce is they're much more insistent on that why and understanding that. And they should understand why. And the organization should want them to understand why, because they're going to be better employees and do better work if they understand why.
So then would you say that how you've learned to define your career success is constantly asking even more of the why? That maybe you weren't aware of that earlier on, but now you know that is just core to how you view yours or anybody that you mentor, their business success is the why.
100%. And Andy Grove, very smart man, another one of his favorite things to say was ask the next question, which is another form of saying asking why. And when somebody gives you an answer, then you dig deeper and you dig deeper and you dig deeper. And that whole exercise is to get to the why. Ultimately, why do you want to do this? Why do you want this to happen? So I can do a better job of fulfilling your expectations and your needs.
It seems like once you understand the why, then you are much better equipped to map out the how.
Oh, absolutely. The how and the what and the when and yeah, everything. 100%.
I've always been intrigued by the why behind companies and careers that thrive, because in the end, I was trying to figure out what it would take to help me reach my own growth potential. I knew if I could figure out this why, not just for me, but for others, it could help clarify their what, when, and how. Like Brian de Lawtonville, I have a lofty goal too. I want to help individuals bridge the gap within themselves to achieve that meaningful fit they are all seeking. I want to help cross that chasm between people and organizations so they can get aligned on common goals, so real traction can be made together. That can only happen when there is a clear understanding of the mutual value exchange. I see a future of strategic, intentional career mashups. I want our organizations and society to start embracing the unique, multifaceted people we all are. And I firmly believe that doing so won't just make us happier, it'll make our organizations more successful and resilient in the long run. I also think there has never been a better time for us to start as individuals and as a collective. 2020 and 2021 have been rough for most of us, unlike nothing we have ever experienced as individuals or as a society. Gallup's 2021 State of Global Workplace Report found that 45% of people globally say their own life has been affected a lot by the coronavirus situation, with nearly 1 billion adults across the planet losing their jobs or business. Gallup concluded that, quote, employers need to rethink their workplaces in 2021. And most importantly, leaders need to recognize the influence of employee well-being and employee engagement on workforce resilience, unquote. There's no going back to normal. We each have the choice to go forward into something better. And I think a great place to start is examining your definition of success. Thanks for listening to Strategic Momentum. To connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn at Connie W. Steele or on Instagram at Connie Wang Steele. If you've liked what you heard, please follow the show and share this episode with friends and colleagues. You can also get show notes, links, and more tips and advice from this episode at strategicmomentum.co. I'm Connie Steele, and you've been listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast.